What if I told you that the truest acts of devotion don't echo in mosques or mountains, but in the quiet chambers of the soul, where surrender doesn't shout, but whispers? What if you discovered that the path to transcendence was not up, but inward, through the doorway of letting go? In the next few minutes, you are invited to walk with me, not just through history or theology, but through a hidden corridor in human consciousness, where Eid al-Adha reveals itself not merely as a ritual holiday, but as a cosmic alignment between what we are and what we're meant to become. This is not just a tale of ancient prophets and sacred animals. This is the blueprint of sacrifice etched into the fabric of time, stretching beyond desert sands and lunar calendars into the vast interior of your own life. So stay until the end of this video, where everything will begin to weave together, threads of myth, mystery, and meaning. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the deeper journeys that follow. For this isn't just information, it's transformation. The world remembers Eid al-Adha as the day when Prophet Ibrahim stood at the precipice of obedience, knife in hand, sun at his side, and heart trembling with a paradox only the soul could reconcile. It is easy to recount the events: a test, a vision, a ram caught in the thicket, a son spared. But beyond the literal and the linear lies something more, an invitation from the divine to humanity, one that repeats itself not once a year, but in every moment where love dares to put ego on the altar and offer it up for something higher. In the spiritual cosmos, Eid al-Adha is not an endpoint, it is a portal. It speaks to the language of archetypes, encoded into the collective memory of mankind. Abraham is not just a man, he is the primordial self, confronted with the unbearable tension between personal desire and divine purpose. His son is not just his child, he is every attachment we cling to, every dream we cradle, every comfort we protect. The act of sacrifice, then, is not cruelty, it is alchemy. It is where faith burns through fear and devotion surpasses reason. To the untrained eye, the festival might seem wrapped in ritual, prayers said, animals sacrificed, meals shared. But rituals, when approached without depth, become mere choreography. The true Eid begins where the blade trembles in your own hand and you're asked to lay something on the altar, not flesh, but your illusions, not blood, but the identity you thought was permanent. The celebration comes only after the sacrifice, and not before. That's why the story of Eid al-Adha is not bound to time or tradition. It is eternal, reappearing in various forms in every culture, in every religion, in every person who ever chose principle over pride, surrender over stubbornness, soul over self. It is encoded in the mythic DNA of the human being, because every great transformation is born of a kind of death. The ego must fall for the soul to rise, and that is where the true power of Eid al-Adha lies. It's not in the act of sacrifice, but in what that sacrifice creates. Space. Space for the divine to enter. Space for identity to be reshaped. Space for a new way of seeing, being, and becoming. In that space, a new self is born, not one forged by external definitions, but one pulled from the very source of divine intent. Look around the world today. Every one of us is asked to sacrifice something: comfort, certainty, reputation, even dreams. But the sacred lesson of Eid al-Adha reminds us, what we give up is never greater than what we receive. For in letting go, we do not become less. We become real. We become light. We become aligned. In that spirit, Eid al-Adha whispers the ancient truth to every soul who listens. You are not here to cling. You are here to surrender. And in surrendering, you are not lost. You are found. Through this lens, the festival is not a story from long ago, but a mirror reflecting the eternal drama of inner transformation. And so, as we step into this exploration, let us not look at Eid al-Adha as an event to commemorate, but as a vibration to embody. A cosmic beat in the heart of human history that still pulses through our modern lives, calling us to remember not what we own, but what we owe, not to others, but to our truest selves. This is the journey we begin now. Through symbolism and scripture, flesh and fire, myth and meaning, we will travel inward into the luminous mystery of sacrifice. And by the end of this path, perhaps you'll discover what you, too, are ready to lay down, and what might rise from its ashes. To understand the heart of Eid al-Adha, one must do more than remember a story. They must enter it, and not as a spectator, but as a participant in the great drama of the soul, one that plays out under the illusion of separateness, but is guided by the unseen geometry of divine will. This is not merely the celebration of an act, but the remembrance of a cosmic principle, a principle so central to spiritual evolution that without it, transformation cannot occur. At its core, Eid al-Adha is about sacrifice. But sacrifice, in its truest sense, is not destruction. It is refinement. It is the fire that purifies gold, the loss that clarifies purpose, the letting go that becomes the letting in. In a world obsessed with accumulation, of things, of titles, of control, Eid al-Adha turns the mirror back on us and asks, what are you willing to give up to become who you truly are? This question is not abstract. It is carved into the very essence of the festival. When Ibrahim received the divine command to sacrifice his son, it was not simply a test of obedience. It was a shattering of identity. For to offer your child is not just to give up flesh and blood. It is to sever from the self all that represents legacy, future, and selfhood. It is the unraveling of attachment, the deepest kind of death. And yet, from that unraveling, a higher order emerged. The provision of the ram, the preservation of life, the ascension of faith over form. This is the first great paradox of Eid al-Adha, that in surrender there is salvation, that in the loss of control we gain access to the deeper rhythm of the universe. For life does not move in straight lines, it spirals, and every spiral begins with release. This is why the story is not confined to Islam. In all sacred traditions, the theme of sacrifice appears like a universal fingerprint. The crucifixion in Christianity, the sacred offerings of Vedic fire rituals, the fasting and renunciation in Buddhist monasticism. Each one reflects a deeper truth, that to rise, one must first bow. To transcend, one must first be emptied. Eid al-Adha is but one face of this eternal law, reminding us that we are not separate from the divine. We are sculpted by it, chiseled by its demands, until what remains is no longer just human, but holy. Another theme, tightly woven into the spirit of this festival, is trust. The kind of trust that defies logic, that walks willingly into uncertainty, that holds on to a whisper of God even when the world is silent. Ibrahim did not understand why he was asked to perform such a thing. His heart must have broken 1,000 times in the journey toward Mount Arafat. And yet, he walked, each step not away from his son, but toward the unseen purpose that called him. It is this sacred movement, from comfort into mystery, that Eid al-Adha honors. For faith is not a feeling, it is emotion. It is the choosing, again and again, to believe that the unseen knows more than the seen. Yet, there is one more thread, subtle but potent, that binds this celebration together: provision. The story does not end in sorrow. At the moment of absolute surrender, God intervenes. A ram appears, caught in the thicket. The knife does not fall. The son is spared, And in that moment, the universe reveals its true nature, not as a cold executor of suffering, but as a merciful architect, always waiting for us at the edge of our limits, always prepared to meet our offering with a higher gift. Sacrifice, then, is never a subtraction. It is an equation. What we release multiplies in unseen ways. What we relinquish is often returned, not as we gave it, but transformed. So when Muslims across the world participate in the physical acts of Eid, offering the meat, praying together, feeding the poor, they are not reenacting a myth. They are stepping into a sacred pattern, participating in an eternal choreography where heaven and earth touch through human hands. The sacrificed animal is not about blood. It is about consciousness. It is about reminding the self that nothing belongs to us, that life is on loan, and that to give is not to lose, but to align. This is what separates Eid al-Adha from a mere tradition. It is not a holiday, it is a sacred echo, a vibration that, when felt fully, shakes loose all the illusions of ownership and self-importance that veil our view of the real. It is a call to stand in the same space Ibrahim once stood, in the narrow gap between duty and desire, and to choose the higher path, not because it is easy, but because it is true. And so, the festival becomes a compass, a recentering, a return. It pulls us back from the chaos of material life, from the illusion that we are in control, and it places us at the altar of our own becoming. It whispers to us that we are not here to merely survive, but to serve, to offer, to participate in the sacred story still unfolding. Imagine the scene not just in the physical world, but in the astral architecture of the soul. A father stands trembling, not out of weakness, but out of awareness. Before him lies not just his son, but every identity he has ever known. His legacy, his dreams, his emotional world, all concentrated into one living being. And now he must raise the blade, not in cruelty, but in obedience. Not to end, but to begin. It is here, in this suspended moment between breath and blade, that the deepest symbolic narrative of Eid al-Adha reveals itself. What happened on that mountaintop was not just a test. It was a cosmic play, scripted in the divine theater of human growth. It was the rehearsal of a law written into the spiritual DNA of the universe. What you cling to will bind you, but what you release will set you free. Ibrahim's act wasn't one of violence, but of transmutation. He did not sacrifice his son. He sacrificed the illusion that he owned him. In mystical traditions, this moment mirrors the death of the ego, the false self that claims possession, control, permanence. The ego says, "This is mine." The soul whispers, "Nothing is." And in that contrast, the stage is set. Eid al-Adha is not a story of blood, but of breaking. Breaking the illusion that love is about holding on. It's about letting go so completely that only love remains. And what of the ram, caught in the thicket at the final hour? Symbolically, it is the substitution of the material for the spiritual. It is grace intercepting the fall of the knife. It is the universe saying, "You have given enough, now receive." The thicket, too, is no accident. It represents the complexity of life, the tangled choices, the overgrown forest of doubt that often obscures our way. Yet within it, provision waits, unseen until the moment of surrender. There is also the story of Ismail, the son who lay willing upon the altar. His role is often softened in retellings, but it is crucial. Ismail's acceptance was not passive, it was transcendent. He becomes the embodiment of radical trust, the knowing that when the soul aligns with the divine, even death is not feared. Ismail is the child self within us, the pure consciousness that does not yet carry the weight of societal illusions. He does not resist, because he has not yet learned fear. His presence on the altar represents the willingness of the true self to yield to a higher will, trusting that love does not destroy, it transforms. Now shift your gaze to the broader frame. The animal sacrifice observed by millions during Eid. In the literal world, it is a ritual. In the symbolic world, it is an offering of the lower nature to the higher. The animal, whether sheep, goat, or cow, becomes a mirror for the instincts we must master: hunger, pride, attachment, and fear. The cutting of the throat is not slaughter, it is severance. It is saying, I see what I am capable of becoming, and I offer my basest self to the fire of higher purpose. When done consciously, the ritual is no less than an initiation. But perhaps the most overlooked dimension of Eid al-Adha is the shared meal, the division of meat between family, friends, and the poor. In mystical symbolism, the distribution is not just charity, it is unity. It is the erasure of boundaries. It says, what nourishes me will nourish you, for we are not two, we are one. In that shared act of eating, the community becomes the body of humanity, and the act of giving becomes an act of returning. Consider also the time of the year. Eid al-Adha takes place at the culmination of the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca, a journey that itself is rich with inner symbolism. The pilgrim sheds worldly attire for simple cloth, echoing the shroud, walking the path of death to ego. They circle the Kaaba, the symbolic center, as if to say, life revolves around the one. And in that sacred circling, we see the pattern again: surrender, submission, sacrifice. This sacred geometry echoes in nature itself. Look at the stars. They revolve in orbits, not linearly, but in spirals. Look at your breath. It rises, falls, and returns. The universe does not progress forward, it dances in cycles. Eid al-Adha is part of this eternal choreography, and when we step into its symbolism, we realign ourselves with the rhythm of divine law. The deeper invitation of this festival is to find your own altar. What is your Ismail? What are you still afraid to release? What vision have you been shown that requires your obedience before understanding? And more importantly, what thicket holds your unseen provision, waiting only for your surrender? When seen through this lens, Eid al-Adha is no longer just a holiday. It is a ritual of remembrance, not of what happened in history, but of what happens in the soul when it walks toward truth, trembling and resolute. It is the eternal story of how the human spirit, when stripped of everything it clings to, finds itself face to face with God, not in the heavens, but in the space it makes by letting go. The story has been told, the symbolism has echoed, the metaphors have drawn back the veil, but now comes the most important question of all. How does one live this? For what use is a ritual if it remains confined to the script, never touching the raw edges of daily life? If Eid al-Adha is to be more than history, more than poetry, more than sacred memory, it must become a way of being. The truth is, we are all sacrificing something all the time. But the question is, are we sacrificing from awareness, or are we simply losing pieces of ourselves to unconscious patterns? In the spirit of Eid al-Adha, the task is not just to give up something, it is to choose what we give up, and to do so with intention, clarity, and elevation. When you forgive someone who has wounded you deeply, you are reenacting Eid al-Adha. You are placing your pride on the altar. The blade falls on resentment, and in its place, something sacred rises: compassion, peace, even healing. When you walk away from a career that brings you wealth but robs you of purpose, you are sacrificing your security for alignment. When you choose to tell the truth, even when a lie would serve you better, You are offering up your comfort on the altar of integrity. These are not small gestures. They are modern rituals, woven invisibly into the fabric of a higher life. The challenge, of course, is that real-world sacrifice rarely looks romantic. It can look like staying silent when you're misunderstood, because ego demands vindication, but the soul asks for humility. It can look like working behind the scenes without recognition, because the heart has learned that service is not always seen. It can look like letting someone else win the argument, not because you're weak, but because peace is more sacred than being right. In these moments, we are not far from the mountaintop of Ibrahim. The drama may not be so theatrical, no voice from the sky, no vision in the night, but the stakes are just as high. For the altar in the modern world is often hidden, behind the desk, in the home, in the silence between two people. And the knife is not steel, but choice. What we choose to keep, and what we choose to let go of, defines the shape of our inner world. Even the act of charity, central to Eid al-Adha, holds deeper implications when practiced with consciousness. It is not just the giving of food, it is the breaking of the illusion that one's abundance is truly their own. When we share what we have, we defy the scarcity myth that says there's not enough. We declare, through action, that giving expands us, that in generosity we do not lose, we become more whole. But even more radical is the practice of invisible charity, to give in secret, without the need for recognition. This is sacrifice purified. This is ego removed. And it echoes the ram that appeared without fanfare, fulfilling the divine design without applause. The communal aspect of Eid al-Adha also reminds us that transformation is not a solitary affair. The feast is shared. The sacrifice is witnessed. The poor are included. This is a direct confrontation with the Western myth of isolated enlightenment. In truth, no one ascends alone. We rise together, or not at all. And every act of sacrifice that includes others becomes not just personal, it becomes cosmic, a contribution to the healing of the collective field. And what about those who have nothing material to give? Eid al-Adha speaks to them too. The truest sacrifices are not made of money or meat. They are made of intention, will, and surrender. Sometimes the poor give more than the rich, because what they offer is soaked in sincerity. The widow's coin, the orphan's prayer, the laborer's exhaustion, they become sacred currency in the divine economy. They teach us that it is not what we give that matters most, it is what it costs us. In a world spinning ever faster toward convenience, indulgence, and gratification, Eid al-Adha stands as a spiritual interruption. It says, pause, reflect, remember who you are. You are not the sum of your possessions. You are not the image in the mirror. You are the soul behind the sacrifice, the light behind the flesh, the being who remembers that letting go is the highest form of power. So ask yourself, right now, in this life you are building, what are you unwilling to give up? That is your altar. That is your mountaintop. And that is where your next evolution waits. The call of Eid al-Adha is not just to perform a ritual, but to live a principle. To walk every day with the awareness that the divine asks not for what is easy, but for what is real. And when we respond, not just with words or tradition, but with the movement of our lives, we align ourselves with something far greater than dogma. We align with the eternal current of becoming. The story ends where it began. But like all true circles, it ends not at the same point, but at a higher octave. We return now to the altar, the knife, the ram, the trembling heart. But it is no longer just Ibrahim's story. It is yours. It is no longer just a sacred holiday. It is a living truth, pulsing quietly beneath your every decision, relationship, desire, and fear. It is the call to sacrifice, not as loss, but as luminous becoming. The final act of Eid al-Adha is not the feast. It is not the sharing of meat. It is not even the relief of a test passed. The final act is the transformation of the self. If you return from the ritual unchanged, then you have only celebrated a memory, not embodied a mystery. For the essence of Eid al-Adha is not what is laid down, but what rises up in its place. When you release the false, the real can finally speak. And what it speaks is your name. Not the one the world gave you, but the one etched into the soul before time began. Imagine for a moment that your life is the altar, not a part of it, but the whole of it. And everything you believe you are, your roles, attachments, achievements, regrets, is what lies upon it. What then is the blade? It is your awareness, your willingness to pierce the illusion of separation, to cut through the masks you wear, to see with the eyes of the soul instead of the eyes of survival. Eid al-Adha teaches that only what cannot be taken from you is truly yours, and all else must be offered, willingly or by force of time. But this offering is not without reward. The paradox of divine law is this: what you surrender returns not diminished, but glorified. Just as the ram replaced the son, just as the sacrifice was met with divine provision, so too are you met by grace when you act from truth. When you place fear on the altar, courage comes. When you place pride, humility arrives. When you place self, the self awakens. And in this awakening, something ancient begins to stir. You remember that you are not here by accident. You are part of a cosmic pattern, a sacred unfolding. Your pain, your sacrifice, your surrender, it all matters. It is all part of a divine economy, where nothing is wasted and every offering is turned into light. You are not losing, you are being refined. So let this festival no longer be confined to the calendar. Let it live in you. Let every breath be an offering. Let every decision be an altar. Let every moment of release be a prayer that says, I trust the mystery more than I trust my fear. This is not religion. This is revelation. If you have listened this far, you are no longer just learning. You are remembering. You are remembering that sacrifice is not about blood. It is about fire. A fire that does not consume, but clarifies. A fire that burns away illusion and leaves only the gold. This fire is in you now. Let it rise. Let it burn away the voices that tell you you're not enough. Let it sear through the habits that keep you small. Let it consume the fear that guards your comfort. And from its ashes, step forth, not as one who celebrates Eid, but as one who embodies it. For Eid al-Adha is not merely about what Ibrahim did. It is about what you must now do. The ram is caught in the thicket of your doubts. The knife is trembling in your hand, and the altar is your life. This is not metaphor. This is the moment. Lay it down, whatever it is. Then look up and see what the divine has prepared for you in its place. Your sacrifice is not the end, it is the beginning.